all of you in, except we're just all working with Councillor Clark, and Councillor Eaty has technical internet issues where he's living.
Morena councillors and any members of the public who are watching this meeting of the Bay of Plenty Toi Moana Regional Council. Welcome to the Chief Executive and Council staff. And as this meeting is being live streamed, I would just remind councillors that if you'd like to speak, that you use the appropriate icon, which is the hand up function on this Zoom. First item on the agenda will be a karakia to open the meeting. I'm going to ask Councillor Lyle Thurston to conduct that, please. Councillor Thurston.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. Colleagues, never let us forget we're forever in the holy presence of God. Almighty God, we ask that you give us wisdom in the decisions we make here today and give us guidance in working with our regional communities to promote their social, economic, environment and cultural well-being. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Councillor Thurston. First item on the agenda is apologies. So we have no formal apologies. We have an apology for lateness from Councillor Eaty, who is having some IT problems, and Councillor Clark, who is attempting, it looks like he's just turned up.
Made it, mate.
Just made it. Thank you, Councillor Clark. We have the public forum, but we have no public in this forum. So in place of the public forum, as councillors are all aware, I would just like to note that in the space of the last 2 weeks, that this council, Toi Moana Bay of Plenty Regional Council, has been the recipient, or should I say the staff have, on behalf of the council, have been the recipient of 4 national awards in terms of our operation of our business. So in terms of expanding those, you'll see with us today we have Bruce Crabb, we have Pim DeMonchi, and we're currently waiting for Greg, and I will hand over to Chris to introduce the individuals as well as the awards. Mr. Ingle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, it's a proud moment for me and for the ICM group of the Regional Council to have this recognition, particularly for Bruce Crabb for the Kopiopio project, which, as councillors will know, has been a long and at times quite difficult project to complete, but Bruce and his team have completed that work. And it has now been recognised actually for the second time, because as you'll remember, he had his team in front of the council I think it was just before Christmas, when he received the Australasian Groundwater, one of the awards there. So this time he's received a second award, of course, from the Solgum Society of Local Government Managers process that was announced last week. So that's of great pride to me, and a major project, and great to have that one completed. I also need to acknowledge Fiona McTavish and Matt Taylor, who were helping with the project governance at the sort of high level with myself, because we did go through some tricky bits there, including a reset towards the end, as you might recall. I'm not sure if Greg's on the call yet, but he's also won again in partnership with Te Arawa Lakes Trust for our Catfish Killers program that we jointly deliver with Te Arawa. And again, that's an award that's been given for the co-governance elements of that. So that's something that I think our regional council is showing great leadership in at this time, perhaps more so than some of the other councils. So we're leading the way there and setting an example of how things can be done in partnership with Te Arawa Lakes Trust, and therefore demonstrating their kaitiakitanga as well at the same time. So I think they are probably the award winners, and we were just there as well. But the final one, of course, Pim DeMonchi, you'll be very familiar with his project of the Kaituna rediversion. Greg just puts an apology. The meeting invite he has took him to the public transport meeting, so he's
Yay!
he's with us now. He's with us now, Chris. Yes.
Okay. So congratulations, Greg, for the Catfish Killers. And I think that's actually the second award as well for that project, because they also won the Biosecurity Award last year for the Minister's Award. And the final one, of course, the Kaituna rediversion. This was an NZPI, a New Zealand Planning Institute award, and it was put forward actually by Opus or WSP consultants who were doing the project management and the planning side of things for us, or for PIM, and they won the award for that category as well. And I don't know if Pim, did you want to say any words about that? I mean, it's been a major project that you've worked for at least 7 years on, but just to acknowledge the Opus element of that.
Sure, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't be long because councillors have heard me talk about this project way too many times over the last 7 years, but just acknowledging the contribution of Stephanie Brown in particular, who's been contracted to council for this work since 2013, assisted by Simon Banks in the Tauranga office, and obviously, as with Greg's project and with Bruce's project, it's been a partnership with Tangata Whenua and the community all the way through.
Thanks, Pim. And sorry, I had my video off that whole time. I would just maybe give an opportunity for Greg or Bruce. I told them they didn't have to do speeches, but if you wanted to say a few words, either of you, now's your chance.
Mr. Crab.
Thank you, Chris. Just I'd like to acknowledge it was very much a team effort and this close relationship with stakeholders all the way through. That was really good, but also appreciation to the council because, as you know, we had to come back to you more often than we would have liked for asking for more funds, but it's pretty nice to get to this position. Thank you.
Greg.
Yeah, again, thanks. Obviously it's been a real proud moment for my team and I, and also obviously for Te Arawa. And it's really been fantastic to work with Te Arawa, see them step up. They were wanting to engage in this process and they've delivered beyond our wildest expectations, really. So just feeling really proud of our work that the team have done with Te Arawa on this kaupapa.
Thank you, Greg. So on behalf of the governance body of the council, could I again acknowledge not only the three gentlemen here as the team leaders, but also all your staff, because sitting behind each and every one of you is a raft of people who have contributed to the success that we have been able to enjoy as a regional council. So once again, thank you very much on behalf of the councillors. That takes us through to the next agenda item, item 3, which is acceptance of late items, and we have no late papers to consider. Item 4 is confidential business to be transferred into the open, and there are no matters to be transferred into the open. Next one is declarations of conflict of interest. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest in terms of the agenda today from any of the councillors?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Councillor Crosby here. I'd like to declare an interest in part of section 8.2, which relates to the nomination for president of LGNZ.
Thank you, Mr. Crosby. That conflict of interest is noted. Anything else, councillors?
Councillor Brunning here, just
Councillor Brunning.
chair of the Kaimai-Mamaku Trust.
Okay, noted, Mr. Brunning. So that moves on to the next agenda item, Regional Council minutes of the 17th of April 2020. I'll move they be a true correct record of that meeting. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second.
Hackam, Mr. Von Duddleson. I'll put that. Please raise your hands. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. So any matters arising out of those minutes that any councillor would like some further explanation or queries on? Doesn't appear so.
Yeah, Doug.
Councillor Winters, sorry.
Winters here. Just when are we going to, now that we're in level 2, when are we going to rescind the motion about the emergency committee?
Chief Executive.
Good morning, councillors. Through you, Chair, we didn't activate the emergency committee, so we chose not to activate that at all. So therefore, it hasn't been in play.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Winters. Anything else? If not, we will move on to item 6.1, which is the chairman's report. We can take it as read. As you'll see, there's a comprehensive suite of engagements that I have attended over this period. Are there any matters of explanation, further clarity that members would like some further discussion or explanation around?
Just one thing from me, Doug. You've done presentations of the joint presentations of Quayside and Regional Council to all the TLAs, and I think Rotorua and one other TLA was cancelled. So you're going to reschedule those, please?
Yes, so Rotorua and Tauranga are the outstanding ones, and we'll have a schedule circulated to council in terms of when they are to take effect.
Thank you.
Anything else, councillors?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I note you mentioned the green projects that we submitted up to government,
Yes.
and with the budget announcement this afternoon, I presume we will be receiving any advice of any success in those today.
Fiona.
Yes, through you, Chair, we will let you know as soon as we have been informed, and we are looking forward to the budget announcements.
Anything else, councillors? If not, we'll move to 6.2, Local Government New Zealand Association AGM process and other representative matters, which is on page 29 of your agenda. Pretty self-explanatory, and you'll see the recommendation there is outlined in 7 points. Councillor Crosby, as noted in terms of conflict, is seeking support for standing for the presidency of LGNZ. The Bay of Plenty Regional Council is nominating Mr. Crosby. The next one, item point 4 there, is appoints myself as the Regional Council presiding delegate for the purpose of voting at the LGNZ Annual General Meeting. And we have 2 other spots for councillors to effectively operate as delegates at that AGM. The 6th one there is Councillor Love wishes to resign as council representative on the Rangataiki River Forum, and as advised in terms of the Stop Bank bylaw, which is currently being consulted on, we have a recommendation there under 7 that Councillor Tui Kairarako be appointed as a member of the Flood Protection and Drainage Bylaws hearing panel.
Point on, no, it's isn't that represented on the Rangataiki River Forum, Doug? Point 7.
Oh, sorry. Yep, sorry. So what I just outlined there is actually number 8.8, which you're notified of. So you've got Councillor Iti being appointed to the Rangataiki River Forum, as well as on the hearing panel for the Flood Protection and Drainage Bylaws. Is there any explanation in terms of the LGNZ in your meeting delegates, a nomination of the president? So you'll note that in terms of the delegates, there's myself. I would recommend that Councillor Nees be one of those other appointees. How many do we have, Fiona? We're going to have the 5. So do we have any interested councillors who would like to fill the other 3 spots? Sorry. Councillor Love.
Yes, confirmed. And I would also like to speak about the Rangataiki River Forum resignation at some point.
Right, councillor. So we've got Councillor Love. I saw Councillor Winters and Councillor Von Duddleson.
Chairman Lyle here. I'd like to nominate Councillor McDonald, if I could, please.
For the
3rd place on that.
Third place. So Councillor Love, you just want to speak to your resignation. Is that right?
Yeah, yes, please, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Von Duddleson, you had your hand up. Do you want to speak, or do you want to potentially fill a spot?
I was looking at potentially filling a spot, but I'm relaxed.
Okay. And who else have we have there?
You had Councillor
Councillor
Winters.
Rose. Councillor Rose. And Councillor
Yeah,
Winters.
I was looking at filling a spot.
Okay. And Councillor Winters.
Oh, look, I'm easy, Doug. You know, if somebody else wants to go, fair enough. I'm just easy.
Councillor McDonald, you've been recommended. As are you interested in attending the AGM? Councillor McDonald.
Yes, I'll be fine with that, Doug.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nees.
Just to confirm that I'm keen and available for the AGM, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Right, so we have 3 spots to fill if there's myself and your Deputy Chair, Councillor Nees, attends. So I'm going to recommend that we have McDonald, Councillor Rose, and who else was in there? Councillor Winters. Yeah, what's your position, Councillor Winters?
No, I'm keen. I'm keen. Yep.
You're keen?
Yep.
So Mr. Von Duddleson, you're happy if I put Mr. Winters in there?
As I said, I'm very relaxed, no problem.
Good
Okay.
spread, good spread across the bay, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Councillor, so in terms of item 5 and the recommendations there, there's I'm in item 4, so there's Councillor Nees, there's Councillor McDonald, Councillor Rose and Councillor Winters. I'm going to put the resolutions from 1 to 7. Does everybody want any more explanation on any of those issues? Mr. Love, sorry.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to speak about the Rangataiki River Forum situation. I discussed with you before the training started about my work schedule, and you agreed with me that I would not be nominated for the Rangataiki River Forum. It therefore came as some surprise to me when I was noted as being absent on the minutes. So I never expected or intended or to be a member of it. So I really do owe an apology to the Rangataiki River Forum for my non-appearance, but as I said, I was not aware that I was a member of it.
Okay, councillors, I have several conversations going on here. Look, maybe it's an administrative slip up on our part, Councillor Love, so we apologise for that, but I'm sure Rangataiki River Forum will continue in its current exemplary fashion. So, Fiona, what were you referring to?
Yes, through you, Chair. We're just looking for a councillor to volunteer for recommendation 7 for the Rangataiki River Forum.
It's Councillor Riti, isn't it? Or is he already on there?
It's already on there.
He's already on there.
Yeah. Through the chair, could I make a point here?
Yes.
I would actually like the forum to actually discuss whether, and we should discuss, do we need 5 councillors in there? Logistically, the more is not necessarily the merrier. Councillor Winters and Councillor Love will tell us we tend to dominate the conversations simply by the mass of us there. And I feel that forum would genuinely probably be more at ease with 4 rather than 5 councillors. So I'm questioning whether we actually need to make an appointment in that space.
Okay, Councillor Clark, I mean, they're fair comments. You've raised it before, and I think whilst we have the opportunity to fill 5, if you can take the recommendation back to the Rangataiki River Forum, the issue is whether or not we have to fill 5 or we actually only fill it with 4. So one is changing the rules, which is probably more difficult than just nominating 4 people and 4 people turn up. But can you bring it up at the Rangataiki River Forum?
I'll do that.
Get them to bring a recommendation back to council.
No problem. Cheers.
Okay, we'll have Mr. Winters wishes to speak, and then followed by Councillor Von Duddleson.
Oh, thanks, Doug. Yeah, I just wanted to concur with Bill. I think the legislation or the attendance says up to 5 members from regional council. I'm really comfortable with 4. It's a daunting committee when all of us, it's quite a large committee when we are all in attendance. So I'm happy with 4, and I think the 4 of us can represent us really well.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Winters. Mr. Von Duddleson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. My suggestion would be to let this lie on the table so that we don't make an appointment, but we leave ourselves open if we do need to, at a later stage, feel that we aren't getting the representation we need. So by leaving it vacant, I don't think we're breaching anything, and it just gives us a bit of leg room. Thank you.
We just remove it. Okay, so I'm just getting some advice, Councillor Von Duddleson. So essentially, in terms of the recommendations, item 7, we'll remove that, and that we accept Councillor Love's resignation. We'll remain silent on it. Okay, do we, Yvonne, have we had the recommendations moved and seconded?
Happy to move.
Okay, no, apparently it's been moved and seconded. Is that right? Thank you, Mr. Winters. Thank you, Mr. Von Duddleson. So all those in favour say aye, against, carried. Thank you. And congratulations, Mr. Crosby. We wish you well. So that will take us.
Can I thank the council for the support? It's greatly appreciated.
Okay, thank you. Item 6.3, towards thriving Kaimai Mamaku Forest, a proposal to increase the animal pest control. So this is on page 33 of your agenda. And Councillor Brunning has declared an interest in this.
Can I just give an introduction to this to be followed by Pim Demonchi?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. As stated in the report, the forum, Kaimai Mamaku Forum, was established in 2009 to bring together all the stakeholders interested in the Kaimai Mamaku, and then along with the iwi hapu. And of course, the notable groups that have been working away for a number of years in the Kaimai forests voluntarily are the Tani Wainuku Trust, Whakamaramara Incorporated, and the Blade, and the Ongatiti Trust. The Kaimai Mamaku Forum just before Christmas last established a trust to have a legal entity, and I was nominated by the Joint Agency Committee, which is the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, the Waikato Regional Council, and the Department of Conservation, and I was elected as chair of that. Staff from our council, namely Hamish Dean and Pim Demonchi, our Coastal Catchment Manager, put a proposal up for the trust to consider as a way of moving forward with an action plan. There'd been a lot of debate in the past, but struggled to get to an action stage. The trust received that document and said to our staff, could that be a document that could be adopted by the 3 members of the agency? They went away and came back, and the result is the document that's in front of you today. So I'll hand over to Pim Demonchi to explain the document.
Thank you. Mr. Demonchi.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman. So I drafted a proposal with Hamish Dean at the after discussion with Councillor Brunning. We presented that proposal to the Trust on the 27th of March via Zoom, and it's been through a number of iterations since then. And it was great that it was adopted by the Trust and the steering group of the forum on the 1st of May. To my way of thinking, I've been on the sidelines of the forum over the last 11 years, working on projects that are similar, but not actually involved in depth. And it seems to me that the forum has achieved a lot of good things in terms of discussions, objectives, visions, etc., but hasn't yet made that step change in on the ground action. And council's investment to date has been significant. I did a rough estimate that I think we've contributed something like 400,000 over the last 11 years. The objective with this proposal is to catalyse both immediate increases in animal pest control to improve biodiversity in the ranges, as as has been recognised as needed for that whole period, but also to grow and establish social licence for further operations together with hapu and communities at a local level. So I don't know if any of you were involved with or heard about the work that Cam Speedy did on behalf of and with the forum last year, but he came to the realisation that the forum couldn't really put together a detailed plan for animal pest control over the whole ranges because there were so many players, and the local context was different in different parts of the Kaimai Mamaku. So what this proposal does is it shows some joint agency leadership. It's a proposal that has the collective support of the Department of Conservation, Waikato Regional Council and Bay of Plenty Regional Council, with all three as funders and with the Department of Conservation as the key statutory land manager. The three parts to the proposal are: one, to match the existing agency funding dollar for dollar from the funding that was allocated by Council on the 27th of June last year through the annual plan process. And that would lead to significant improvements in animal pest control and biodiversity immediately from the 1st of July. The second part of the proposal is to support what we call Flax Roots Community Igniter or hapu activator roles. And that is where, instead of focusing on a coordinator to work on high-level discussions for the whole forum, we divert that funding into people to support people at a much more local level at the 6 hubs around the Kaimai Mamaku to see what's appropriate in each of those settings and to support them to achieve the things that they want to see happen, where those align also with the agency's conservation and environmental objectives. The third part of the proposal, it's interesting to me that there has been Department of Conservation funding available for much more significant animal pest control in the ranges since about 2015 through their Battle for Our Birds or Tiakina Ngā Manu program. But that funding is contingent on social license to operate being established. So I think what we're doing is we're doing two things. We're doubling funding for work where social license to operate already exists, but we're also investing in the growth and establishment of social license in places where it's currently not present, so that further funding available through central government and from the allocation that you made through the annual plan process last year can be accessed. So that's a very brief summary of it. I can go into more detail if councillors would like me to.
Thank you, Mr. Demonchi. I think one of the important things here is the budget implications as outlined in item 3 of the discussion document. Do you have anything to add to that? Because that essentially says in terms of the current OPEX that it is underspent and you want to carry that forward into years 24, 25. Is that right?
Correct. That's correct.
Okay, thank you. So we have questions from Councillor Nees and Councillor von Dadelson.
Thank you. Not a question, Mr. Chair. You've just answered that about the carry forward of the unspent funding for this year. But I just want to congratulate Pim and particularly Councillor Brunning for their progress on this. I think it's excellent step forward, and I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Nees. Councillor von Dadelson.
Yes, I'm really pleased to support this project. This is what some of our core responsibility, and it's great to see our council stepping up and continuing to support it so strongly. So well done. Take a big pat on the back to staff and take a big pat on the back to Councillor Brunning, who has spearheaded the community initiative through his trust. I'm happy to second this motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so the motion's been moved and seconded, but we have further councillors waiting to speak. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, am I there?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess in this whole thing, it causes me some grief to hear that $400,000 has been wasted, essentially, previously with no sort of results on the ground. And so I would like to see the agreements here be reasonably tight and that there be audit functions in there to prove that we are getting value for money. I mean, I commend the project, absolutely. It's long overdue, but I'm also bitterly disappointed in the space about the lack of financial input from DOC on the ground. And as we seem to be the sole providers of pūtea of significance in this space, I think there should be some audit reporting back to us as to how it's going.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Councillor Winters, then Councillor Crosby.
I was just going to congratulate Norm and Pim and the team for getting this up and running. Look, this is a big step forward for me. Even, you know, this is in our patch too. So just congratulations to the team for getting this up and going. So I fully support the recommendation, Mr. Chair. Happy to second any if I need to.
Councillor Crosby.
Just very quickly, I too want to support this and acknowledge what is a major step forward from planning and discussion into action, and also the collaborative approach that's taken on. A few years ago, I had an opportunity to go into the Kaimai Mamakus with representatives of Forest and Bird and saw firsthand the damage done there under the canopy, and it was quite concerning. And so it's good to see this happening. I hope at the budget announcement today that there will be a good financial shot in the arm for the Department of Conservation. It desperately needs it, and I don't think we should really blame the organisation itself. What we need to do is support resourcing for it from the central government. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Crosby. So just to bring it to a conclusion, could I also acknowledge the work that's gone into this, especially the work that Councillor Brunning over a number of years has put into this. And more recently, he was asked to chair the Manaaki Kaimai Mamaku Trust. So that's why he has a conflict of interest here. But underpinning all the work done to date and the work going forward is a large range of volunteers who give their time freely. And I think we just need to acknowledge that, and that this injection and commitment to do more hopefully will motivate them and keep them going for a significant period going forward. So the recommendations are outlined there in terms of page 33, which is essentially endorsing the Joint Agency Committee proposal for implementation. It's been moved and seconded. No further discussion. I'm going to put those, and can we please note that Councillor Brunning will be abstaining from this vote due to his conflict of interest. So all those in favour, raise your hand. Against? There's none against. So thank you, councillors. The resolution has been passed. So that takes us through to council agenda item 6.4, recommendation to council from Strategy and Policy Committee, Development of Interregional Marine Pest Pathway. So that's page 59 of your agenda. Mr. Engel, or?
Yes, I can explain this, Councillor, Mr. Chairman. This is an item that came through the Policy Committee a couple of weeks ago, and the Policy Committee looked at a paper, you may recall, and looked at option 3, which is develop consistent interregional pathway rules with the other northern councils, requiring biofouling thresholds for craft to be met while moving. So this is really just a formality for the council as a whole, because this is the way the Biosecurity Act is set up, that the Strategy and Policy Committee can't actually make that decision on their own. They need endorsement from council. So the matter has already been debated by the committee, but we now require the council's endorsement. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Thompson is Chair of Strategy and Policy. I suppose the most important issue here in terms of the recommendation is there's a request to staff to bring back a proposal that will have some financial implications to it, because currently this proposal as presented today doesn't have any. Is that right?
Move the recommendations.
It's moved Councillor Thompson. Mr. Rose, second to Councillor Crosby. Thank you.
I just wanted to say well done to the staff over the years with this subject. Over the past couple of months, I've been reading into it, and the work that's been going on, not only between in the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, but with other regional councils as well. It's been great to see how much work has been done, and I'm excited for the future of this project. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rose. Any other comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was a little bit regrettable at our strategic and policy meeting that we had technology issues and weren't able to get some of our questions answered. And I'm really pleased that the proposal's coming back to us to give us a bit more information about costs. Because from my understanding from subsequent conversations with staff, that the practicalities and details still have got a lot of distance to go to work out how well this would operate. So I guess our chances when the proposal comes back a little bit more formed to either support this option further or maybe amend it. Would that be right?
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Nees. This recommendation really just gives permission for us to continue to collaborate with the other councils to develop up a proposal, but it won't be actually released out there for submissions with council support until you've seen it again.
Oh, that's excellent. And just in principle, I think it's excellent practice to be working with other regional councils to try and get some consistency in the policy space. So, you know, I thank staff for bringing this forward.
Councillor McDonald.
Morning, Chris. Just a question to you, Chris. Are we speaking to organisations in our communities as well that play quite a key role in looking at marine pests? And I'm actually referring to Manaki Taiao and the likes of Chris Battershaw that have worked together with our own scientists, particularly around the Tauranga Harbour, you know, right from the top of the harbour to the bottom. And a lot of extensive work has gone into that type of work. So are we going to bring them alongside us to work in the space as well?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. I'm starting to think that I should have asked Greg Corbett to stay on the line. I'm 99% certain, though, that the answer to your question would be yes, because I know that Chris Battersall's team is inextricably linked to what our biosecurity team are doing in Tauranga Moana. So I think that will be the case. And as this develops further into the planning phase of writing rules and that sort of thing, I think we'll be increasingly involving the community around the harbour.
Thank you.
It's probably covered in recommendation 4, Mr. Ingle. Okay, anything else? Any other councillors? If not, the recommendation on page 59, which composes 5 subpoints, has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, so raise your hand. Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, on your agenda, councillors, I'm now going to move to page 101, which is the Local Government Funding Agency Draft Statement of Intent, Half-Yearly Report, and hand over to Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the Statement of Intent and Half-Yearly Report for the Local Government Funding Agency. The Local Government Funding Agency has been very successful. As councillors are well aware, there are now 66 council members.
Matt, you're very faint.
Right, there are now 66 council members for the Local Government Funding Agency, and it's resulted in our borrowing costs, current weighted average of 1.56% on all borrowings. So the Local Government Funding Agency that started in 2011 has been very successful for the whole sector and very successful for the whole Bay.
Matt, can I ask you to put your camera on?
Through Mr. Chairman, yes, I've put my camera on now. So yes, so a very successful agency. There are some uncertainties at the moment in the current period, of course, with the availability of overseas funding available to the local government market and to the sector as a whole, but the AA+ rating that the LGFA continues to enjoy, which is equal to the sovereign rating, of course, has ensured that we are able to source that funding at that lowest possible cost. So nothing to add to the report, Mr. Chairman, which is very comprehensive from the LGFA in their draft statement of intent. Some uncertainties ahead, but we are well insulated from that, of course, by the Local Government Funding Agency being effectively a cooperative of local government entities.
Any questions of Mr. Taylor?
Happy to move, Mr. Chairman.
You're happy to move, Mr. Love. I'd have to say that this particular entity is currently a very high profile entity in terms of not only working with the sector, but also working with the Reserve Bank in terms of the current fiscal and financial implications that the country will have to deal with in the next, and local government will have to deal with in the next 18 months. So it's been moved by Councillor Love. Do we have a second?
Second.
Happen to second, Mr. Winters. All those in favour, raise your hands. Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, so we'll move to page of your separate report. So that's circulated under separate cover, which is Arataki Tuatoro Performance Monitoring Report for Q3. And are we handing over to Debbie Highland or Matt?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman. So Debbie Highland will take us through this report with Javan. So just to introduce it, yeah, this is your third monitoring report for the financial year, for the 1920 financial year, and there are clearly some uncertainties for the final quarter, and this report attempts to address some of those uncertainties, but it is reporting up to the March period, and Debbie's just got a few slides to take us through, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you, Matt. And Debbie, could I just compliment you on the very good executive summary, which I think captured the essence of this report. And if councillors wanted any more detail, we could go into the dialogue or the narrative that followed from that. But I thought the summary was very well put together.
That's brilliant.
Ms.
Thank
Highland.
you. Good morning, Chairman and councillors. Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm hoping you can hear me okay. Just really recognising everybody's comments so far in terms of Arataki Tuatoru, our performance monitoring report. Heading into COVID-19, we demonstrated a very strong service delivery performance and a strong financial position. And recognising the comments yesterday from the Prime Minister around the fight that New Zealand has had to beat the virus, and the Chairman's comments around challenging conditions now as we get the economy moving and rebuild better than before. And looking ahead to our annual plan deliberations, which are on the 2nd of June, and our LTP pre-engagement, we've got a lot of work there in terms of supporting the region's recovery. COVID-19 has had impact on our service delivery, on our KPIs and on our forecast expenditure levels through to the 30th of June. And we have taken a significant amount of time to recalibrate our forecasts so that you can inform your decision making as part of the annual plan deliberations. I'd like to introduce Javan Alek, our performance manager, who will take us through our KPI performance. Thank you, Javan.
Thank you, Debbie. So through the chair, as you can see, there are 33 long-term plan performance measures we report externally. At the end of Q3, 55% are forecast to achieve their end of year targets. 6 are only reported annually. 2 of them have no data available, which leaves 7 measures which are not on track and are forecast to be at risk of not achieving the target by the end of the year, which is about 1/5 of the targets. Now, the highlights include the fact that we're ahead of target for replacement of non-compliant burners in the Rotorua airshed, which relates to air quality, and we're also well ahead of targets for the processing timeframe for consents. So we're right up near the 100% statutory timeframes that is required under legislation. Debbie, could you flick over to the next slide? So if we look at the measures that are at risk, so I'm going to focus on those where we may not hit the target at the end of the year. There's a range of issues that have hit us. In some ways, it's a little bit of a perfect storm. So some of the measures were already a little bit behind performance through Q3 before COVID hit, but the expectation was that we'd use Q4 to catch up. Now, obviously, with COVID hitting so hard, that's made those measures where that was the intent largely impossible. So if we look, for example, at the maintenance, repairs and renewals for rivers and drainage asset management, or the monitoring inspections for resource regulation and monitoring, those were already tracking behind target through the end of Q3, so before the impact of COVID. But the fact was that the expectation would have been throughout Q4, we could have caught up by doing a lot more inspections, hitting 100% through Q4, or catching up a lot of those maintenance, repairs and renewals. So because of COVID, it's very unlikely that those will be able to recover up to the level of anticipated performance. At the same time, we can also see measures that were very much on track through Q3, but now the forecast performance is at risk, not because they were behind performance, but because COVID's come in and sort of whacked them over the head. So if we look at transportation, we were well on target through the first part of Q3. Year to date, we were definitely on target to hit our end of year overall patronage target for passenger transport. With the impact of COVID through Q4, that's unlikely to happen. So whereas the line was right on target, it's now going to fall well away. And it's the same with the number of visitors to regional parks. As you can see, we had a target for the whole year of 105,000, and through Q3, we were already up to 92,000, which meant we only needed another 13,000 in Q4 to hit that target. With COVID hitting, it's unlikely that'll happen, although a quick de-escalation of the alert levels could make it achievable if the May and June visitor numbers return to the 2019 levels. So if we can see there, through the end of Q3, we were averaging about 10,000 or more visitors per month. We only need 1 month or so of that, May or June, and we'll be able to hit that target. Debbie, if you could go to the next slide. Thank you very much. So the other targets that are at risk include emergency management. So although we don't have current data available, we do know that we had over 80 staff filling emergency coordination centre roles in the COVID-19 response, which is above the 48 roles that are required for us to meet this target. For the draft council and committee meeting minutes, it's almost certain we won't be able to meet this target. Because we were already behind timeframes and target through the end of Q3, and there are actually fewer planned meetings, there simply won't be enough volume of meetings to get that number up from 88% to 95%. So that's very likely to be under target by the end of the year. The next one is the reduction of carbon emissions. A couple of things here. We do know that the new buildings are dropped considerably compared to baseline. So we know that the upgraded regional house is definitely achieving the carbon targets. However, with the delays to the Whakatane upgrade, the year-end reductions that we kind of banked ahead of time will probably not be met. But we do know that those areas where there have been upgrades, they are delivering the anticipated benefits. So it's not a case that we're not getting what we thought we'd get. It's simply that what we're getting has been a little bit delayed over what was originally anticipated.
Thank you, Javan. Further details provided on page 39 of your agenda in terms of the KPIs and service delivery. Moving on to our financial forecasts and performance year to date to 31st of March 2020, acknowledging our forecast budgeted surplus of $1 million against a budget of $9 million deficit. In terms of our operating expenditure, to date we've delivered $90 million of expenditure, and we've forecast 131 through to the end of the year, $13 million lower than our annual budget of $144 million. As Javan said, we had significant progress year to date, then COVID-19 lockdown. And we have been actively seeking and managing our efficiency savings to provide that value for money. And as consequently, we're forecasting higher reserves. Just like to draw your attention to the impacts of COVID-19, approximately $2.2 million, mainly through our external resourcing, consultants and contractors, and some of those variable costs such as electricity, fuel, catering, and so on, that are slowed through the lockdown. Also, as previously reported through Arotaki, is our $7 million underspend on the Rotorua Te Aroha Lakes mainly through the Land Use Change Incentive Scheme, much of which will be associated with the Plan Change 10 appeals later the year. And noting that this is funded 50% by the Ministry for the Environment and 50% committed through the previous long-term plans from reserves. We've also been providing regular updates around liquidity and cash flow management, and just acknowledging that we continue to be paying our businesses for services delivered on a weekly basis to ensure liquidity and cash flow through the business sector. As a result of the revised forecast expenditure, we're now forecasting operating revenue of $132 million, $2 million lower than our annual budget of $134 million. Recognising the comments around our revenue streams being more diversified and to some extent resilient through Quayside's reserving policy. So that has secured our dividend over several years. We also have rates, investments, central government funding for a number of large contracts. However, again, we are still seeing some impacts on our revenue and we are managing well in terms of liquidity. At this stage, COVID-19 impacts through to the 30th of June are approximately $650,000 through consents monitoring harbour dues, also another $600,000 through Treasury impacts, and approximately $1.5 million lower fare revenue forgone through public transport, and that will be offset with Waka Kotahi NZTA underwriting of fare losses through to the 30th of June 2020. The consequential impact of lower forecast expenditure on the land use changes, approximately $2 million of MFE funding that we'll need to carry through to 2020 and 2021 in the first instance. Our TAs are our rates collection agents, and working with our community and businesses around financial hardship considerations and payment plans, remissions, postponements within the existing policy settings. And acknowledging that our investment revenue has already been received. Prior to COVID-19, we were forecasting over $50 million of capital expenditure delivery, and that equates to 85%. We're now forecasting approximately 63%, and excluding the project upgrade is 70%. That equates to a full year forecast of $138 million. $22 million lower than the annual budget of $60 million. That is all funded through external borrowings. Significant underspend is associated with rivers and drainage, some of their major projects, as opposed to some of the maintenance and renewals, which Siobhan talked to. And $9 million being carried forward for buildings upgrade project across Wallingford House and Tauranga Regional House, and a small carry forward associated with Whakatane. In terms of our IT projects, particularly public transport, the new regional integrated ticketing system, approximately $600 to $1 million underspend this financial year, and acknowledging that actually COVID-19 has presented an opportunity to accelerate delivery, and the B-card bus ticketing system will be implemented at this stage in July instead of much later in this financial year. We also have a priority focus on our customer relationship management tools and more resilience in terms of our cloud infrastructure, particularly around our financial management system, which have all been pipelined for early delivery in the next financial year. The report also outlines that we have significant reserves that are building up, and drawing on the Prime Minister's comments yesterday that we are rebuilding together and better than before. But I just also wanted to acknowledge the prudent financial management of councils, of this council, and particularly those councils of the past, to help build up these reserves, and acknowledging the Chief Executive and the work of leadership team to actively seek those opportunities to deliver savings and better value, and also greater resilience, and that's in line with the central government comments yesterday. Contributing therefore to higher reserves forecast to support recovery and rebuilding together. I have provided an update on our reserves forecast as captured in the Arataki appendix. In respect of our regional fund, we're forecasting $32 million at the end of this year, but noting that a significant amount of that is already committed to the Opotiki Harbour project, $20 million, and the Whakatane District Council's Awatarariki managed fan head retreat. Therefore, we have available funding of $9 million in the regional fund. The equalisation reserve is $10.4 million forecast at this stage. We've committed or allocated for modelling purposes approximately $4 million for use through the annual plan. And PT reserves again, $2.8 million available, of which $1 million has been modelled as committed through the annual plan. Rivers and drainage works reserves tend to build up over time and are used as required by the schemes. $4 million available for lowering targeted rates. CDM, nearly $1 million, of which $450,000 has been modelled for use in the annual plan. And the infrastructure fund is our PPS funding that has already been allocated to projects through Rift, Rotary Lakes, land use change, buildings upgrade and so on. And that has been modelled for next year's annual plan. In terms of Treasury, we have a more detailed look at the market update and the portfolio as part of the confidential update. But wanting to draw through our investments, $193 million, and our borrowings are $191 million. We've got a full update coming. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. Councillors, any questions to Debbie? Just to comment, Debbie, in terms of the Treasury comments on page 18, which you've just covered off, I think in these circumstances, essentially cash is king. But in those Treasury comments, it does outline there the exposure that the council has, both in term and current account debt. But that does not recognise any potential liability in terms of the PPS.
No, we have a more detailed look at headroom and so on coming up.
Yes. Councillors, we have Councillor Love, Councillor Von Duddleson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillors will know I have asked in the past for the financial reports to be succinct and really fit for governance purposes. They've always been very good, but from the governance perspective, they needed some improvement. And I'm delighted to say how good this particular report is. The staff have met all the requirements to the point where I've hardly got any questions at all. It enables us to properly exercise our control of the region's expenditures. I've just got the one question which you just alluded to, Mr. Chairman, on the appendix on page 47, where we have a budget FTE of 434.5, but only 402 FTEs actually. And I would just ask the CEO if to review those posts which have been vacant, and some of them have been vacant for some time, to see if we really do need them. I think if we can save money where we can, this would be good. Other than that, I'm just happy to move the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Love. Councillor Von Duddleson, then Councillor White and Councillor Thompson.
Yes, thank you, staff, for a very good report. Just a couple of comments. When we get to page 32, I'd like some clarification. We talk about employee expenses at forecast for the full year at 37.something million, 0.7 million, and contractors and consultants at 46 million. Does the contractors and consultants include the likes of the bus contract, or what? How is that? There's not enough detail there to understand how that is really made up. So I'd like some clarification on that, please. The other comment I would make is there is no expectation that you'll meet your KPIs this year, in my view, not from me anyway. This is not business as usual. This is we're in emergency recovery mode now, and we need to actually recognize that and address it. So it's not business as usual. Third point is I have said ever since 2016, when I got back onto council, that we're building a huge asset base in our quayside investments, and all credit for that. But we were putting ourselves at risk from government or other interference with our business because we'd built up, and suddenly we're getting a crescendo of people who are looking at the regional council's balance sheet. And I think we need, and it's something that we need to do in confidential, but we need to develop a strategy to deal with that. I think that, you know, this pandemic is a 100-year event, and I think this council needs to actually set aside not only a recovery plan, but a recovery fund, so that we can make some really meaningful support to our community across equally, so it's balanced across our whole region. So it doesn't just go to one area, but that's something that I have asked before to include in the COVID-19 world, but I think it's really essential that we do that, Mr. Chair. So I'm happy to second the report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor von Duddleston. But as you well know, the part of those considerations will fall out of the financial strategy that we're currently working through, and any deliberations in terms of what we do will follow that work being accepted by councillors. So Councillor, so it's been moved and seconded, but we'll have Councillor White and then Councillor Thompson. Titaru, could you unmute yourself?
Will do.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair, through you. A nice report, very succinct and easy to read, so thank you for that. Just on the ongoing underspend with the incentive program, and given that MFE are 50% investors in this space, and given the current scenario under COVID, what's their appetite to continue to carry this over?
Chief Executive.
Yes, through you, Chair, we've had no indication at all from MFE that they're not prepared to carry this forward. In fact, quite the opposite. I will follow up with them again, but certainly there has been no indication from the Ministry for the Environment.
Thank you.
In that regard.
I think it's a very pertinent question, Councillor White, and as we were preparing some of the shovel-ready projects before we submitted them, because we only had a very short amount of time, I had a conversation with the Minister to see what the appetite was to move away from a pretty strict regime in terms of the qualifying monies. He was open to suggestion, but I think unfortunately we didn't have the support of some of our partners in terms of what we were proposing, but doesn't mean to say we can't go back and revisit that. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for an excellent report. Just two issues. The first, and I might have missed it, is there somewhere where we can understand the source of the contributions back into the equalisation reserve? Or sort of, should I say sources?
Yes.
Yes.
Debbie.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor. Obviously, we've been working hard over a number of months on our efficiency savings, but you'll recall that when we adopted the annual report on the 30th for the year ending 30th of June 2019, we basically had a significant improvement in our treasury performance through the long-term plan that contributed to some of the deposits into the reserve. And we also have our ongoing savings through our employee expenses, through managing the recruitment there and through fit for purpose reviews. We've also been working hard with Te Tuara in the corporate services to review all software costs, fuel costs, training costs, etc., to ensure that those are fit for purpose and delivering the value for money. I have a full reconciliation which I can share with you following the meeting.
Oh, thanks very much, Debbie. Look, I really would appreciate that, and particularly if it includes the sources of any rate-funded activities that are going to be carried forward into the new year. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Winters.
Thanks, Chairman. Just following on from Andrew's comments, I just wanted to, the discussion this afternoon on the financial strategy, marvellous document, really looking forward to the discussion. But I think the other piece of information we need to be waiting before creating a fund is what the Crown's going to announce this afternoon. Let's not just create a fund for the fund's sake. I think what we've done with the Kaimai Mamaku partnership with Crown agencies, that's marvellous. That's the way we've got to act into the future. And let's see what the Crown's announcing this afternoon in terms of their recovery, and we can partner with them and come in behind.
Thank you, Councillor Winters. So no other questions, councillors. We'll move to the adoption, which is receive the report and note the information and variations in the report. So it has been moved and seconded, didn't it, Councillor Winters? Who was the seconder? Councillor Von Duddleston. So all those in favour, raise your hand. Against? Carried. Thank you, councillors. So I now want...
Mr. Chairman, I think I moved that one, not Councillor Winters.
Okay. Oh, well, we'll change that for you then, Mr. Love. Happy with that, Mr. Winters? So I'd like now to move back to page 63, and with us we have Stephen Boyle, I understand, and Craig O'Connell. Craig being the independent chair of BOPLAS, Bay of Plenty Local Authority Shared Services. So it's on page 63 of your agenda, and I will hand over to Matt Taylor to introduce the draft statement of intent for 2023 and half-yearly report for 1920. Welcome, Craig. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just some brief comments before I hand over to Craig and to Stephen. So yes, this is the statement of intent for 2021, one of our CCOs, of course, and the half-yearly report. And I'll just hand over to Stephen and Craig. Thank you.
Thank you. So firstly, as always, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to Council about the statement of intent. What we would like to do is provide firstly a very brief overview in terms of activities and in terms of business as usual. I'll pass over to Stephen to run through the statement of intent, but albeit briefly because you've all seen it. But the primary purpose is to provide the opportunity to discuss current activities and how we are responding under the environment that we're operating in. So firstly, if I can just address the current operation of the organisation, it's working very well. Stephen's done a great job in terms of maintaining momentum and activities. Staff are working very effectively remotely, and they're continuing to do so at the moment, so we'll attribute to the staff and to Stephen. None of the projects have lost any time at all. The major project we are currently overseeing is the insurance renewals, and sorry, prior to that, the RFP around insurance brokerage services. I can confirm that we haven't even lost a day. That's continuing to the timetable, thanks to the cooperation and goodwill of all involved. So business as usual is continuing, delivering precisely as we would expect from BOPLAS. So thank you, Stephen. I think if I can just talk very briefly about COVID-19 response. We are obviously looking at this and saying, so what should we be doing? What opportunities is it presenting? And how does BOPLAS contribute to the region in terms of collaboration? We've already started that process with the Operations Committee, which, if I can just very briefly outline, is a committee made up predominantly of second-tier managers across all of the councils, and their purpose is very much to look at opportunities, to critically assess opportunities, and present them to the board in terms of these are the opportunities we recommend should be pursued. So the previous Operations Committee meeting approximately 3 weeks ago, we subverted the agenda completely and said, all right, given what's happening in our world, what are we learning across councils? What are the things that we need to change and do? And this will be an ongoing conversation. The
Operations Committee were, I think, very comfortable with not spending a lot of time on business as usual, as that's ticking along comfortably, but very much wanting to address the items that are flowing out of the current situation that we can contribute to. So that's very much our focus now, and it will certainly be the focus of the next board meeting. And again, if I can just sort of comment briefly, the board meeting has shifted just a little in focus away from specifically saying what should BOPLAS be doing, what's the work program for BOPLAS, to a broader framework around what are the collaboration opportunities and initiatives we should be addressing as a region. And all of the directors are very comfortable with that move. And following the identification of any of those opportunities, the next item is there something that BOPLAS should be pursuing? And if not, then how should it be pursued? What's the vehicle that we should be using to progress? So just providing an outline of the sort of shifts that have taken place over the last 12 months. So thank you for that time. And Stephen, if I can pass to you now just to provide a brief overview of the SOI that has been tabled.
Certainly. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to present our Statement of Intent. The Statement of Intent is our primary document that sets out BOPLAS's strategic direction, covers the next three financial years, and we value the opportunity to receive input and comments from the council on it as well. You may have noted there's no significant changes from last year's Statement of Intent, but in saying that, we anticipate a number of changes under COVID-19. The expectation is that there'll be more projects and different types of projects, primarily driven by the transformational activities that are happening across the region. Some of the key points, which are in section 17, while there's a continued commitment around shared services projects, there's a stronger emphasis on joint procurement initiatives within the 2020-23 Statement of Intent. BOPLAS has been very successful in joint procurement, and the board want to ensure that there's continued value and savings delivered to all of our councils through the proactive management of existing contracts and investigation of additional procurement categories as well. And Appendix B of the report includes a list of potential opportunities for investigation, but also remembering that that list was put together sort of pre-COVID-19 as well. The board also have increased the focus on working interregionally and looking for opportunities to collaborate with other local government organisations. Currently, we've got several projects underway and being undertaken in conjunction with Waikato LAS, Hawke's Bay LAS, and Manawatu Wanganui LAS as well. We see real opportunity in sharing resources, and if we're tackling the same sort of projects, doing it in collaboration across the greater region rather than just within the BOPLAS region. There's a section included in the Statement of Intent titled Stakeholder Engagement. Obviously, that's a real priority for us, and BOPRC have direct input to that through the Operations Committee that Craig was just talking about, and of course through the board as well. And the Statement of Intent includes a financial forecast, and that's based upon anticipated projects, and it's balanced for the next 3 years. But of course, initiation of new projects may create variances to that forecast as well. So Craig, I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, Stephen. So, Mr. Chair, happy to pass over to you and address any questions or comments from your councillors.
Okay, thank you, Craig. Councillors, I have a question from Councillor Nees, then Councillor Crosby and Councillor Eatey. So, Councillor Nees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and also to the representatives of BOPLAS. I've got a couple of comments / questions. Firstly, congratulations on the work you're doing with procurement, but I wonder whether you've done any work on social procurement. It's something that we've been talking about a bit in the council ourselves, and we see some real benefits in developing a social procurement model. So if you could respond on what thinking you've done about social procurement and how you can sort of bring that through the work that you do. And my other comment is around shared services. I think we've said in the past our disappointment that we've not managed to get more shared services across the region and interregionally. And we know that there's initiatives, particularly in the water space, for more aggregation, and just ask what thinking your operations committee is doing around that. Thank you.
Thank you. So just on the two questions, the two items you've raised, social procurement, we haven't specifically had an address at BOPLAS, but I can share what we have done within the MWLAS environment, where we've had a couple of presentations on social procurement, and that has it has been useful in terms of helping shape some of the ways that we actually go about putting an RFP out and the weighting of the various characteristics. So Stephen and I haven't had a lengthy conversation about that, but I've got a very good starting point and happy to add that to our agenda, Stephen, for the next board meeting. So thank you. It's a good reminder to do that. Shared services, but we share your frustration is the wrong word, but we are equally ambitious to tackle any shared services opportunities that we can, and it's not that there's a constraint from the board or the operations committee. I think the primary concerns that tend to come up is either BOPLAS is not the vehicle to progress some of those initiatives, it's not resourced for it, so we would need to come back and come to the shareholders in terms of additional resourcing if that's required, but we're happy to do so. And I can say that all of the board members are very effective representatives of their respective councils and continue to table these opportunities and discuss how we progress. The Three Waters in particular has been an item that's been on our agenda. To be fair, we haven't made any significant progress on that, but it is something that we continue to discuss. To some extent, we have been waiting to see some of the guidance from central government in terms of what's going to happen, the standing up of the water regulator, etc., and what are the expectations from council. But I can certainly say that it's a live topic.
Thank you, Craig. And just before I hand over to Councillor Crosby, who may want to continue, I think this is a classic example, as Dame Margaret Baisley would have said, be prepared to read the tea leaves. And if your directors have not taken some cognizance of commentary made by ministers in recent times in terms of Crown funding coming to the party for especially horizontal infrastructure and what the terms and conditions might be, maybe a little late. Councillor Crosby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Craig and Stephen. First of all, I want to again acknowledge the great work that BOPLAS has done and continuing to done and has done in the past with regard to cost savings across the region. But following on a little bit, as per Councillor Mees, I don't want to break what's becoming a habit of a lifetime now, and that is to challenge BOPLAS about wider opportunities. And I do look across the Kaimai Range into Waikato and see what they are starting to do, which is considerably more, in my view, and more visionary than BOPLAS. So I'd encourage you to follow their lead if you can. I know you work closely with them. But again, you know, I do hear the response that BOPLAS may not be geared properly or structured properly to look to do further work in bundling up contracts, for example, and other operational areas that could be scaled up to get more effectiveness and efficiency to the consumers, which tend to be the ratepayers. So again, I'd encourage you to do that. And if you're not the right entity, or you don't have the right skill sets, or you don't have the right governance, which I actually disagree with, then I suggest that you make some recommendations to do it. Changes on the way in some shape or form, particularly in the three waters. That's going to happen very quickly. And I would like to be prepared for that across the Bay of Plenty and the Waikato, rather than having something imposed upon us. If you look at the waters, three waters, for example, I'm not talking about fresh water here. The signal has been very clear for 2 years that they are looking to scale up, hopefully in a voluntary way, in terms of getting more effectiveness and efficiency and capacity in the waters. Some councils have done superb work across New Zealand in this space, but some are challenged as well. And that's in the Bay of Plenty. And I'm concerned when I hear, as an example, Tauranga City and Western Bay looking to do something, finally, maybe together. Rotorua heading off in a completely different direction, all within the Bay of Plenty. So I challenge you, and the CEs are most of the directors here, apart from you, Craig, who is independent, to understand and read the tea leaves, as the chairman has said, and show some leadership and give some direction within the councils. Otherwise, I fear that will be taken away from us. So the time is right. You know, we're in a regime of change. So again, you could read your statement of intent, the draft one, to say you can actually do it now. But for the last 10 years, frankly, I've seen no commitment and no will to do it. So I'm challenging you to have those hard conversations within BOPLAS and come back to us, all the councils within the Bay of Plenty, to do better. Because I know you can do better. You've got some great people there.
Thank you, Councillor Crosby. I suppose the challenge for you, Craig, is it's the old adage, you can lead the horses to water, but you can't necessarily make them drink, can you?
Look, I think if I can respond, firstly, I think the challenges are entirely appropriate. I have no difficulty at all with what's been put out on the table, and we need to be able to respond. And you can rest assured that that will be very much the topic of the next board meeting. So you can anticipate a response. Fiona, I'm sure, will report back as to where the collective view has landed. And if I can defend, I guess, the CEs and their roles, there's not a lack of willingness to act. I think what we need to do is just determine those first few steps that we need to take and get it underway.
Thank you, Craig. Councillor Eatey.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Kia ora, Craig and Stephen. Thank you for your presentation. As a first-term councillor, this is the first time that that BOPLAS has actually come across the council table since I've been sitting at the table. So it is great to see another part of our business and see how it works. And I just wanted to echo the sentiments of Councillor Nees regarding social procurement. And she's correct, where we've been talking about innovation in the procurement process and leveraging that procurement to meet the four well-beings as well, because that's another pressure that's coming on to councils from Wellington, as well as the three waters, as the four well-beings. And in particular, growing, in terms of social procurement, growing the diversity of our supply chains. So I just wanted to suggest, perhaps you said you had a couple of presentations regarding social procurement. Auckland City Council have actually done some fantastic work in that space, and in particular the Southern Initiative and the work that they have done with an organisation called He Waka Eke Noa, and they tag team and give a really good presentation. And Waka Eke Noa is actually going national, and they work with the supply chain in terms of getting the supply chain diversity, the capacity of those who are coming into the supply chain to be able to increase the make their tenders better. And that's really important as well. I think these things are really important to work hand in hand as we go through that. And I just wanted to mention that as well. Thank you. Kia ora.
Thank you, Toi. Councillor Thompson.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for your presentation. Yeah, I'm just going to carry on the theme. I think the tea leaves are stewed in the pot. But I don't think it's necessarily at the BOPLAS level that we should be throwing the responsibility, because for me, what's lacking very much is coordinated regional governance. And I see BOPLAS has done some great work in terms of operational matters, particularly in and around procurement, but it's not charged with regional governance. And that to me is actually where we need to be stepping up, and with our TLA partners, central government, Māori organisations and others. And at the moment, it's not just the three waters that's going to hit, it's the public sector reforms and the government's new way of working across the regions. At the present point in time, we have a mayoral forum, we have Bay of Connections, we have Connect Bay of Plenty, Collaboration Bay of Plenty, and yet we can't seem to get a strategic view of actually the tea leaves. And frankly, it's frustrating. So I don't necessarily think that this should all lie at the door of BOPLAS. I think it should lie at the door of all of us who are involved in governance across the region. And I think I'd like to see strategy and policy take this a little bit further. But one question I do have, and that is around the work stream of regional waste facilities strategy. Stephen, could you just perhaps give us a little bit more info on what's being planned there?
Yes, certainly, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about it. We have 3 projects underway at the moment. The first one, which is fairly well progressed, is around the licensing of contractors and data collection upon those contractors as well. When we began that project, it was just across the Bay of Plenty, but we recognised that there was an opportunity to extend that across the Waikato region as well, particularly given the amount of waste that moves between the 2 regions. So that project's actually underway as we speak. A possible outcome of that may be that there will be an entity established to manage the licensing of the contractors and also to manage the data that's driven through those collections at the moment. It's been recognised that there's only limited data available to councils. Often the collection agencies will cite commercial sensitivity, but by establishing a separate entity that could process that data and then remove the commercial sensitivity from that, it would give the councils much more meaningful data about the waste streams. The second project is a project looking at diversion of organic waste from landfill. That's yet to be started. And the third project we're looking at is a regional infrastructure strategy. At the moment, most councils are developing their infrastructure in isolation to each other, and there's a real opportunity for better collaboration in that space. Once again, that's being done across Waikato and Bay of Plenty regions together. So there's those 3 projects that are currently underway. So, yeah.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Any other questions? If not, could I thank you, Craig and Stephen, for the presentation. You can see that there's a range of views in terms of what are the challenges ahead of us and who needs to step up to the plate. And as Councillor Thompson said, there's a responsibility on governance across the whole region to put a stake in the ground and say if they want improvement. So, councillors, we have the recommendation to receive the BOPLAS draft statement of intent, half-yearly report, and note the contents of that on page 63. Do I have a mover? Councillor Winters, Councillor Nees. All those in favour, raise your hand. Against? Carried. Thank you, councillors. Thanks once again, Craig. Thanks, Stephen. We'll see you at the year's end.
Thank you.
So I think, councillors, that has brought our public forum to the end of our agenda. So for any of those members of the public watching this live streaming, the agenda to be conducted in the public forum has now concluded, and I'll be asking for the live streaming of this to be stopped, and we will move into a public excluded portion of the agenda. So this effectively ends the live streaming. So thank you for those who have taken the time and the interest to participate. Thank you.